Hey everybody, Jim Andrinos here. I am the host of a daily show on Instagram called the Stand Up Classroom. This is the Stand Up Classroom Supercut here for YouTube. And what we're doing is taking all the pieces that we broadcast this week, because we do one every day, and we're putting them back to back for you. So if you want your lesson plans all at once, get them here every Sunday on YouTube. And this is the Supercut for the week of the 6th to the 12th of July. And we want to remind you guys that we are brought to you by fine folks at New Media Comedy and also from the Comedy Legacy podcast. And when you're done watching this, go on to that Comedy Legacy podcast playlist and watch a few of those guys, because they'll teach you a hell of a lot more than I ever could. Sit back, relax, and here's this week's lessons. Hey everybody, Jim Andrinos here, Stand Up Classroom, brought to you by New Media Comedy and the Comedy Legacy podcast. And we are still in the middle of quarantine. I don't know where you are. If you're in New Jersey, you might be in phase 2, or if you're in New York, you might be in phase 2 or phase 3. If you're in Texas, you're in 1875. Apparently, you're back to the Black Plague. But we've got so much that we could talk about while we're here in quarantine, and we can't get as much stage time as we want. We can't get out there as much as we want. It's time. It's time to organize what you have. Your bits are like puzzle pieces. And if you do one bit after another bit the same way all the time, then you're painting the same picture all the time. The simple act of rearranging your bits on occasion, the simple act of saying, okay, I'm going to do the Christmas bit before I do the bit about going home and seeing my family, because I've done it the other way around my whole career, will lead you to find new things in it. You should be organizing your bits so that you know what the bits are, and then playing with the order so you can find what you can find. Now, while we're on the subject of organization, also organize your old tapes. You're going to be surprised when you go back and watch something that you've done from a while back, and it doesn't matter how long you've been doing stand-up. You could be somebody that's in it under a year, or you could be like me, who's been doing it since the earth cooled. You're going to look at old tapes and you're going to go, I forgot about that joke. Oh, I forgot I did that way. Oh, you know what? That was a cool twist that I don't do it that way anymore. Go back, review your old tapes. Yes, it's painful to watch. None of us loves watching our old tapes. Trust me on that. We all see every mistake and every imperfection. But when you go back and watch them, you're going to be able to pull those things that are still relevant, pull those things that you can improve on, and write a better act for the next time you get on stage. Now, if you want more great advice, do not miss tonight, 9 p.m., youtube.com/New Media Comedy TV. Franklin Ajay is our guest on the Comedy Legacy podcast. And dear God, it's like going to college. You got to watch it. I'm Jim. Goodbye, everybody. Happy Tuesday, everybody. This is Jim Andrinos, and this is the Stand Up Classroom. I have lobbied long and hard to start with, an action sequence like me rolling over a couple of cars, firing at people, but they say it's not in the budget. Who says it's not in the budget? Well, our sponsors, which is New Media Comedy and the fine folks at the Comedy Legacy podcast. What you need to know right now is I'm wearing no pants. That's not what you need to know. You came here with some comedy advice. I'm feeling a little sleep, but I'm going to give it to you. One of the things that I did early in my career that really helped me learn how to write is I understood that as a newer comic, my voice was not fully formed. So I wrote in other comics' voices. Okay, that's not saying steal what they do. Go online, find the subjects you want to talk about, and then write it like Seinfeld would. Write it like Chris Rock would. Write it like, a Billy Burr would. Whoever your favorite comic is, write in their style. Write in their voice. The further from you it can be, the better it is. Right? Write in Wanda Sykes-Saul's voice. You know why? Because if you write in Wanda's voice, it's going to be so different than your own that it's going to force you to look at the material differently. Now, I'm not saying perform it in those voices. I'm saying you're using it as an exercise to expand your ability to write, because other comics are capable of doing things that you haven't even thought of doing yet. And writing in their voice exposes you to what they do naturally well and makes you expand that way. And when you go back to writing for yourself, you suddenly go, oh, it's possible to use this tool, or oh, it's possible to use that tool. And that's a very important place to be. Now, I also want to talk to you guys about the audience itself and contacting them on social media and using social media to work for you. Yes, you're going to put show notices up there. Yes, you're going to repost and comment on their stuff and build that engagement. But what you also want to do is you want to give them a reason to talk to you. Ask questions, put up polls, do things that force the audience to be interactive. When you have a small following, it can be disheartening. You may only get 3 responses. But if you respond to the people that responded to you, you've also gotten yourself 3 fans. Now, there's a whole lot of great comedy advice out there, and I am by no means the expert on this. But I do talk to the people that are experts on the Comedy Legacy podcast. If you watched last night, saw Franklin Ajaye. If you missed them, go back and watch. But this week coming up, next Monday, you want to be there, DC Benny. And he gives a clinic on writing for storytellers. I'm Jim Andrinos. Goodbye, everybody. Hey, everybody. This is Jim Andrinos with the Stand Up Classroom, brought to you by New Media Comedy Worldwide and the Comedy Legacy podcast. We want to start today with changing where you write, because we need to learn our instrument. We need to know how we write. We need to know how we're more productive. What are the external forces that are attaching to us that make it easier or more difficult for us to write? We are the instrument that we use to create. So when you change where you write periodically and keep copious notes of the experience, you'll start learning about your productivity. You'll be able to maximize when and how you write. If you're used to writing in silence, write someplace where there's action and life around you. What's the difference? What did you experience? How did that change your process? If you're used to writing in the daytime, try writing at night, or vice versa. How did that change the process? The more we know about how we create, the easier it is to create. So at this stage in your career, tinker, experiment, find out what works best for you. I also want to talk about the fact that we're not stagnant. If you're even remotely decent as a comedian, you grow, you change, you evolve, and sometimes old bits stop working, and it makes no logical sense, because you're a better comic now than you were. Shouldn't the bit be better? Well, it should be if you rewrite it. It should be if you retackle it. Every once in a while, take those old bits that aren't working as well and radically reimagine them. Rewrite them to the point where they're almost unrecognizable. You know, the reasons why bits stop working usually border on performance. We get bored with them. When we reimagine them, when we rewrite them and we breathe new life into them, we have new passion to perform them, and so they grow. Now, we're going to be back again tomorrow with some more tips, but if you really want a workshop on how to create, did you catch Franklin Ajaye last night on the Comedy Legacy podcast? If you didn't, hop over to youtube.com/New Media Comedy TV. Watch it. You will learn so much. I'm Jim Andrinos. Keep writing, guys. Bye-bye. Hey, everybody. Jim Andrinos, Stand Up Classroom. It is Thursday, July 9th, and there is so much that we can talk about. But I want to talk about growing and constantly evolving what you do. Comics need to experiment in order to grow. And that's not just in terms of what you write about, but also how you approach it. If you're a storyteller, experiment bringing in one-liners, bring in a rant, try and bring in some wordplay. We need to constantly dabble in other writing styles. Not necessarily that we're going to go to them. Rodney Dangerfield was never going to break out into a story, but he's going to use storytelling elements to help him craft longer pieces where he strings together one-liners. And that's part of what we do. We have to learn, and we learn by doing. The other thing I wanted to talk to you guys about today was constantly going back and reworking how you perform, especially right now, because right now how we perform is limited. We're performing in outdoor shows, we're performing in drive-in shows, and we're performing most likely in Zoom shows. So it's really easy to get stuck into a very stagnant box of sit here, look at camera, perform. And we can't do that. We have to keep tinkering with what we do in order to have fun, in order to keep the performance engaging for ourselves. If we're not interested in performing, we're not going to perform well for the audience. So you need to experiment. If you've been doing all your Zoom shows sitting down, stand up. If you've been on the back of the flatbed truck while you're performing, in the drive-in shows, hop off it, wander around. You need to experiment with what you have. And as our tools become more limited, we need to expand our performance exponentially. Now, we've got so many more lesson plans for you. If you listen to the Comedy Legacy podcast, you're going to hear some great lessons from Franklin Ajay to Leanne Lord to Tom Dreesen to Rick Overton. We had so many great people, and you can catch all the old episodes wherever you get your podcast, iTunes, Spotify. And this show, the Stand-Up Classroom, is brought to you by the Comedy Legacy podcast and the fine folks at New Media Comedy. Go check everything out. New Media Comedy Worldwide is putting out some great content. We will see you tomorrow. Keep writing. Hey everybody, Jim Andrino's here, Stand-Up Classroom. It is Friday, July 10th. We are brought to you by New Media Comedy Worldwide and the Comedy Legacy podcast. Fridays, as you know, are a little mini lesson, and we're going to talk about setting goals and deadlines that you can actually reach. Because you can set a lot of goals and deadlines. I want to be famous by Tuesday, not in your control. But when you set the ones that are in your control, when you set the ones that you can get to, it's a feeling of accomplishment. It's progress. And we get to measure our progress as we do this. And that becomes incredibly important, especially now during a pandemic when we can't get there. So if you set and say, I'm going to write 30 pages this week, if you set and say, I'm going to spend 15 hours creating this week, if you say, I'm going to make contact with 5 bookers this week, if you say, I'm going to reach out on social media and engage with my fans this week, if you set goals and deadlines that you can meet, you're constantly keeping yourself in a place of creation, and you're giving yourself the reward. Because by meeting it, by setting it that you can, goals that you can meet, you're creating a work environment that makes it pleasurable to go to work because you've got a reward. You have satisfaction. Set writing goals and deadlines. Set performing goals and deadlines, business goals and deadlines, editing goals and deadlines, and audience interaction goals and deadlines. Give yourself those deadlines that you can control. It's going to help you. It's going to help you move your career along. It's also going to help you get that inner sense of satisfaction that keeps us coming back and creating, which is so important now that we're mostly performing in our little Zoom boxes. Now, there's a whole lot of great advice that's going around, and you can get great advice every Friday every Monday on the Comedy Legacy podcast. This Monday, 9 o'clock Eastern Standard Time, DC Benny joins us. Probably the best storyteller in America today. You're not going to get a better, lesson on how to do the storytelling format of comedy than you will from DC Benny, and he was very generous in what he shared with us. Go there, and you can catch all the old episodes on YouTube as well, or you can get it wherever you get your podcast. But keep writing, everybody. I'm Jim. Bye. Hey, everybody. Jim Andrino's from the Stand-Up Classroom. Today is Saturday, July 11th. We are brought to you by New Media Comedy Worldwide and the Comedy Legacy podcast. And I want to talk to you guys about writing from the senses. What do I mean by that? Well, we tend to write either visually, observation, or emotionally, how things made you feel. But there are other things that we can do to make the audience feel, because the audience needs to be participatory in the experience. It just can't be them agreeing and signifying with what they're saying. It should evoke emotion in them. And one of the great ways to do that is to access their memories. And we do that by talking about things that we all have in common. And senses are a great way. See, hear, feel, touch, taste. All of these things are things that when you describe it, when you describe a smell, the smell of bacon frying, it means something to everybody. Now, they may disagree. Some people may hear that smell and think it's the greatest smell in the world. And some people may hear you talk about it and be repulsed by it. But they're participating in the process at that point. The more we can access these things, the more points at which we can engage the audience. So every once in a while, I like to write about the senses. I like to engage them. Sometimes I do it all on the same thing. The sound of the bacon, the feel of the raw bacon versus the feel of the crispy bacon, the taste of the bacon, the saltiness, or the smell of it. And sometimes, I like to take something dominant from each thing. I'll talk about the smell of the bacon and the taste of ice cream and the sight, of my kid running towards me. And all of these things will have different emotions that evoke in an audience member. I also want to talk about something that we can do to control our process. And that's to set deadlines. And I'm talking deadlines that we can actually make and meet. If you set a deadline, I'm going to get famous by Thursday, it's not under your control. But you can set deadlines in your processes. I'm going to make a connection with 5 bookers. I'm going to write 3 pages. I'm going to take a week to write every day. I'm going to produce 30 pages by the end of the week. Whatever those goals that you can meet and you can set, you should. It's going to help you move forward. It's going to help you create a sense of motion to what we're doing. It's especially important now that we're still pretty much under lockdown. So we don't have many things that measure our success. Goals that we meet can measure our success. We have got, so many great ideas for you, so many great things to talk to you guys about on the Comedy Legacy podcast. Go to our website, comedylegacy.com. You can find out about previous guests. There are links directly to them. You can drop us a line. But most importantly, you can watch the masters and learn. I'm Jim. See you guys next week. Bye-bye. Hey, everybody. This is Jim Andrinos. Welcome to the Stand-Up Classroom. It is Sunday, July 12th. We are brought to you by New Media Comedy Worldwide and the Comedy Legacy podcast. I want to talk today about writing without inspiration. Just picking something and writing about it. Why is that important to do every once in a while? Well, because when we only write with inspiration, we're relying on our natural creative adrenaline to get us through the writing process. But sometimes you want to write. Sometimes you want to write more. And we want to teach ourselves the process of writing. So by picking out a topic arbitrarily and then researching it, finding the fun points and writing about it, we're making ourselves be more creative. We're creating a state where we can write about anything. And that will serve you well, because if you have a long career, you're going to understand the turnover of material is important to no end. I also want to talk to you guys about writing in different tenses. This is more a function of editing, but sometimes bits run out of steam and you don't know what's wrong with them. Change of tense. A lot of times we wrote something that happened to us when we were 9 years old, and we say, I did this, I was there, I went there. Instead of bringing everything into the present tense. And that is, here's what happened to me at 9 years old. It happened at John Jay Park. I was in the pool. Keep it present. When you keep it present, the audience is more connected to the emotion. It makes it more real for them, as opposed to hearing a story that's in the past tense. Yes, there are places where you want to put things in the past tense or the future tense. But for the most part, if you're finding that the bits aren't working, look at the tenses and see if you can just bring that up and make it more urgent. So we've got a lot of things to explore and talk about on the stand-up classroom, but we also want to point you to the true masters that are doing this. And tomorrow, July 13th, we got DC Benny on the Comedy Legacy podcast. And if you're a storyteller, you did not want to miss him. He's probably the best in the business at what he does. I'm Jim Andrinos. I'll see you guys tomorrow on the stand-up classroom. Bye, everybody. Hopefully that was helpful. Hopefully you enjoyed yourself. And hopefully there's bits of advice there that you can actually learn from and use. If you want daily advice and you want these a whole lot earlier than you're going to get them here on YouTube, go over to our Instagram page, instagram.com/newmediacomedy. And every day we're going to release one of these. But more importantly, listen to the Comedy Legacy podcast. Those guys are a hell of a lot smarter than I will ever hope to be, and they can teach you a whole lot more than I ever hope to. All right, guys, we will see you all next time on this show and also on the Comedy Legacy podcast. I'm Jim. Bye, everybody.